Hello, I'm Timothy Schmaltz, and I welcome you to my podcast series, When in Rome, Touch the Art. Here we'll get to know my sculptures installed in Rome, their history, and their meaning. In this episode, I introduce my sculpture, Angels Unawares. I remember the first time I came to St. Peter's Square. It was fascinating because I have been doing Catholic sculpture for a long time, years before I actually came here. And the first time I came to Rome was when I was in my early 20s. And this was what I would consider one of the most prayerful places that I've ever experienced. And I remember coming here, looking at the Bernini, looking at the great sculptures here, and thinking very, very seriously that it's a responsibility of me as a Catholic sculptor to take that tradition of doing artwork to glorify, to celebrate our faith, and then bring it forward. And it's almost like I think that one of the ideas about Catholic artwork is it's almost like a homily. What you need to do is you need to actually rejuvenate, create new pieces of artwork to actually further the idea of our spirituality today. And I think especially today, it's very important to add to this library of beautiful artwork. So when I first came here, I thought it would be a dream to actually create sculptures in such a spiritual place as St. Peter's Square. One of the ideas about being a Catholic artwork, and I think it's very important, is that you have a very, very rich history. You have a library of artwork that came before you. And so I think one of the wonderful things about being an artist living today is you can see all of the artwork that's been created in the past. And you can add to that, you can develop. Just like a priest every single Sunday will craft a new homily for those people today. Artwork now, today, can reach out to those people today and hopefully bring in something more to that dialogue, bring something more to those people. At the same time, I believe that artwork is one of the great instruments to promote and to celebrate and to educate people on Catholicism. And it has been done over the centuries. More than 1,000 years, people have been using pictures and sculptures to tell stories. I do believe that it has its limitations, and I'm in a sense positioned myself after obsessively doing sculpture for decades. I became a little bit unimpressed by the idea of sculpture in general. I began to think that within this world today, people are bombarded by so many different things. The least thing people will look at is artwork. And I think that's a great position, because when I attack a sculpture, when I start working on a project, I come from this premise that, well, I better work very hard on this so people can see it. Oftentimes, beautiful things, people are so busy in their day-to-day life that they are invisible. When I create a sculpture nowadays, what I want to do is create it for the person that really isn't interested in artwork, the person that's distracted, and I want to pull them and reach out. So I'll use everything I possibly can to make a sculpture powerful, kind of going from the basis that people don't really like artwork, people find artwork boring. Well, I have to change that. It's my responsibility. The burden's on me. I do believe that if the Gospels, if Christianity was brought down in its most authentic way, there'd be much more Catholics out there. There'd be much more religious people out there. Oftentimes, though, it's done in a kind of a lazy way. So what I'm trying to do with my artwork is distill some of the most hardcore ideas in the Gospels and bring it out in a way that people can see it, that it becomes visible, that people can understand it, The burden's on the artist. It's not on the viewer. And it's my job to, in a sense, convince them with artwork the power and the awesome hardcore Catholicism that I know. And it's my job to do that. And so when I create a sculpture, what I'm looking for is to do something that is very emotional, very powerful, and that will bring people in and hopefully impact their life. And so artwork is a great way of doing it, but we have right now a lot of competition within our culture. So many demands on our eyes, so many different directions. And also kind of the negative connotation of what religion is today. I want to dispel that. I want to get rid of that and bring that purity. And so when I create a sculpture, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if I was an 18-year-old, cynical, what would I want to see that would make me excited? And so a sculpture, oftentimes what I do is I totally have disregard to my time, and I will throw myself at a sculpture and put everything towards it, knowing that it's a tough audience today, but it's an important audience to convert and to bring in. Let me show you one of my greatest instruments that I've created, Angels Unawares. The Angels Unawares sculpture was one of my greatest projects. It was installed in 2019. It was a request from the Vatican Department of Migrants and Refugees. I was in Rome at the time where the new Department of Migrants and Refugees was developed, and I had a supper with Cardinal Czerny, and he asked me if I could create a new sculpture on the theme of migrants and refugees. And I remember the conversation because I said, I have a lot of sculptures already that would fit in that idea of human compassion. And he said, Tim, try to think of a brand new sculpture, a new design for this new department. I went back to my studio in Canada, and almost as soon as I got in my studio, the idea hit me. It just almost fell down from my studio right on top of me. The theme, the subject matter, the architecture within the piece was basically an interpretation of Hebrews 13:2. Be welcoming to strangers, many have entertained angels unawares. The idea was to create a sculpture of a raft or a boat, I wasn't sure at the time, with migrants, refugees, immigrants from all over the world, all historical periods. And in the center of this crowd of people would be an angel. But because of this crowd, you could only see the angel's wings, kind of suggesting that the wings belong to everyone, suggesting that all human life is sacred and that there is that angel within us all. And so the project was I created the small model. The small model was brought up here into St. Peter's Square. Pope Francis blessed it. And about a month after that, I got one of the greatest emails ever. It was, Pope Francis wants to create this sculpture, huge, life-size, and install it here in St. Peter's Square. You could imagine how absolutely amazed I was at this request, because there has not been anything new put within St. Peter's Square here for centuries. So now a new sculpture is coming in. And it was absolutely amazing, because the idea right from the beginning was to have no huge base, no huge pedestal. The sculpture, the boat, as if it is sailing on top of the cobblestones here in St. Peter's Square, suggesting that the boat is going forward, moving forward to St. Peter's Basilica. Very, very symbolic. And what I love about the whole project too is it's almost a sculpture park within one sculpture. There's more than there's actually 140 different figures within this sculpture. So that gave me 100 plus opportunities to get the emotion right, to resonate with all the millions of people that come here, so they could see their own ancestors here in St. Peter's Square. This sculpture is really about welcoming, and that it's our spiritual duty to welcome. And this is embedded within our Christian faith. And this sculpture is kind of a visual, an artistic welcome. And it's one thing to say, you know, everyone's welcome within the church, but to see the actual faces of the people who we are welcoming from all around the world brought in here, I think it is wonderful. So many people come in here from all over the world, and now they have an opportunity to see someone that looks a lot like themselves. I have German, Irish, Indian, Chinese, Filipino, all within one sculpture here. So in a sense, when this whole area was built in the 1600s, it wasn't as global as it is today. This sculpture, with one sculpture, we kind of welcomed them all artistically. So that's what I think is very, very important. And also, I think that Pope Francis installing this piece here shows the spirit and courage that he had to actually use artwork as a tool to bring in the idea that all human life is sacred. How did I make this sculpture? Well, can you imagine knowing that what you're creating in the studio will be placed in St. Peter's Square? I was very, very much conscious that I was doing this as almost a visual ambassador of something that was very, very close to Pope Francis. I realized I was creating something that would become a visual ambassador to one of the concerns that are very, very close to Pope Francis. So in my studio, essentially, I dropped all other projects during the 9 months it took me to create this piece and focused on this. And I initially wanted to create, in a sense, a density of figures, and then it became a density and a collage of portraits and emotions. What I love about the piece is that I think that the emotions represented here are very authentic. It's not a cookies and cream sculpture. It's not all about the joys of migration and immigration, but it's also not all about the horrors. And so I kind of created a collage of the different experiences that humanity must have experienced over the centuries, moving from their home into a new world. There's the joy, there's the hope, but there's also the despair and the forlorn missing of where you came from. And so it's all worked within it in a way that whatever angle you look at the sculpture, you see many different emotional experiences and also many different faces from people from around the world. I oftentimes say that you can't look at this sculpture and not see your own ancestors within it, shoulder to other people. And so it was an amazing project. After I created the piece, I came across a quote that I think is very appropriate from Martin Luther King Jr. He said that we all came from different ships, but we're on the same boat now. And I thought, that's the sculpture here. But what I love about this sculpture also is the idea that right in the center is the angel. In a sense, there is that spiritual center to understanding the idea that all human life is sacred, to understand the idea of migration. Right there in the center is that angel. I actually like to also consider this a new Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty, which suggests the idea of welcoming, is very large, very impressive, but it doesn't address that it's a spiritual duty to be welcoming, to have your hearts open. Here we are in St. Peter's Square, where the sculpture was installed in 2019. And if there's any heart to the Roman Catholic Church today, it's right here within this space. So to have this sculpture installed, it's making such a statement about the idea that all human life is sacred and that all should be welcome. It's fascinating because when Bernini designed the colonnades in the St. Peter's Square here, he designed it with the colonnades coming around as if they're arms to welcome the people coming in. In the 16th century, when this square was developed and created, Rome was already a tourist destination, not only a pilgrim site for Christians, but also a tourist destination for other people from other religions and with no religions at all. So to have this sculpture here in a space that was designed to welcome people, a sculpture on the theme of welcoming, is just so appropriate. The question about why I created this sculpture and put it here, simply because I feel that I am an artistic soldier for the Catholic Church. And I do believe that one of the greatest weapons or tools that we can use today to preach, to promote, to celebrate our faith, and to educate people on our faith is artwork. Artwork does not ask much of you. It's not like I'm giving a book on migration and read this whole book. I'm creating something that people can easily read with their eyes. Artwork is a subtle form of evangelizing. It brings you in. And what I love about some of these sculptures is that the more you look at it, the more you understand on a different level, not always intellectual, but also very emotional. And so the reason why I did this is, in a sense, to act as a tool for the ideas of charity, of the sacredness of life that Pope Francis wanted us all to remember when we think about the migrants, we think about the poor within the world today. And so to have this sculpture here, it's almost like a visual crown that celebrates the idea of human compassion. When the piece was installed in 2019, the feedback was fascinating. A lot of people were not used to a new sculpture being in a place that is centuries old. I remember a couple of reporters, they couldn't reach Pope Francis, but they met Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, and they said, the sculpture, it doesn't match the Bernini's. And the best comment on the sculpture came from Cardinal Konrad. He said, it doesn't matter if it matches the Bernini's, it matches the Gospels. And I thought, that's what artwork should do. It should match the Gospels, it should match the teachings of Christ. So it was absolutely fantastic to hear Cardinal Konrad say that. The response, I think, I remember being here several years ago, and a group of Indians came, around 7 or 8 Indians came up, and I could show them where their people are. It was absolutely amazing. And I thought, you know, here's an idea of an artistic welcoming that is very powerful when people see people that look like themselves here in the Eternal City. Another great quotation, or another great response from Cardinal Konrad, was when he was asked by some of the reporters, how long is this sculpture going to stay here? He said, this is the Eternal City. Let's pray that it lasts here and stays here for eternity. And because it's bronze, bronze lasts more than 1,000 years, so it's absolutely magnificent.
So far, today's chapter of When in Rome, Touch the Art by Timothy Schmaltz. Thank you for joining me this far. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Meanwhile, follow me on my social media.
When in Rome, Touch the Art is a production by Lamashi Communication for Good Causes. Executive producer, Juan de la Torre. Voiceover, Timothy Schmaltz. Camera, Lorenzo Mejia. Editor, Mauricio Ramirez. Design, Mauricio Ramirez. Sound, Lorenzo Mejia.